Good evening and welcome to the January 27th, 2014 regular meeting of the Edina School Board. We do have a quorum this evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. We had a regular meeting on January 13th and also a special meeting on January 13th. Can I get a motion to move and approve those minutes?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the two meetings on January 13th minutes. Any discussion, additions, or corrections to the items as written? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Rick, could you please walk us through tonight's agenda?
I would. I certainly can. Do need to add a agenda item under the action items 8G would be a school calendar change. We'll ask the board for action tonight. This is a result of the number of school closings. We need to make a modification in the calendar. We have two other walk-in items that we'll be bringing to the board, and I believe they're in the board packets. But 8B, as relates to the financing of the kindergarten additions, and then 8F2, which is policy 509. We have some modifications in that as well. But as we look at the agenda, I do want to remind the board and the community that we did have a special training session for the board after our organizational meeting on January 13th. Peter Krems, a consultant that works with the district, just met with the board and talked a little bit about board communications and some of the key steps with board work. The board also met in a work session prior to tonight's meeting. At that time, we heard a report from Wold Architect on the ongoing assessment of our facility needs and challenges, as well as the opportunities that lay before us. The board also discussed plans for their upcoming retreat on February 8th. The rest of the agenda looks like this. We'll be getting some recognitions and hearing some good news items out of the school district. We'll be doing some reports as it relates to a leadership update. From the consent agenda item, we have some personnel recommendations as well as some other items. There's a budget adjustment that we'll talk more about for the 14-15 school year, the joint goals between the city and the school district. Again, several of the consent agenda items have the gifts. Under board actions, we have the appointments of committee assignments and liaisons and representatives to the board. Mentioned about the additions to the kindergarten. We have a master agreement with our health service associates. The budget parameters, we'll be talking quite a bit about budget and planning for next year, as well as the legislative priorities, and then some policy review. Finally, we have our first look at some of the capital project requests for the upcoming school year, and then some appendix information items, and that will conclude our routine items and regular items for tonight's school board meeting.
Thank you, Rick. At this time, can I get a motion to insert item 8G and also the improved versions of the lease purchase financing and also the resident enrollment policy?
I'd like to move that we add agenda item G, the calendar change to reflect the days added back in for the school cancellations, and then the additions that Rick just referred to around the two items that are in our packet, the lease purchase and the policy.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of inserting those items into the agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next down, we're on the recognitions. Rick?
Thank you. I'm going to ask Linnea Paulstrom to come up. Linnea is a lover of nature and a lover of Creek Valley Elementary, the best I can tell. Linnea, why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and the story that you're carrying in your hand tonight?
Well, for several years I've enjoyed going to Creek Valley Elementary School and visiting their prairie. And I went and took some pictures of the prairie and made them into a calendar to go and help raise money to maintain the prairie. And I just have some extras I was planning to go and give to the school board members.
That is fantastic. Let me catch you with one more question, and we're going to let you distribute those. So how did you get interested in the whole prairie flowers, prairie grasses. I mean, the pictures are very detailed, they're very well done, but I know you had to know what was going on in those pictures as well. So how did you get that interest in something like that?
I don't know, I guess I've just sort of always had that interest. I went and just enjoyed going and looking at the creek and yeah, so.
Well, we appreciate you taking that kind of interest and putting that talent into a cause that helps young people with their learning. So on behalf of the community, we want to congratulate you on this great project. We want to thank you for your great work, and I think it's a wonderful honor that you're distributing these to the board. So thank you very much. Thanks for coming tonight. Thank you, Linnea. This time I'm going to call up Mark Lavin and a team of great players who've been working hard on a partnership between the University of Minnesota and Edina Public Schools around the Confucius Institute. So if they could come up and we can learn more about this exciting grant that we've had awarded to us. Joan, you represent the University of Minnesota. You've been very involved in this whole project with the Confucius Institute. Talk a little bit about this.
Well, the University of Minnesota and the Chinese government organization under the Ministry of Education called the Hanban organized a Confucius Institute at our university in 2008. And since that point in time, it's been our primary mission to promote the outreach to K-12 system in Chinese language and culture.
And so you've been working closely with schools. How many schools are you involved with right now?
Under our Confucius Classroom program, we have 11 schools, and we are one of the largest group of schools underneath a single Confucius Institute. But really, we have programs in many of the districts all throughout the state without having this special relationship.
Okay, I'm going to jump over here to Mark. Mark Lavin, who works in our school. Mark, you got interested in this. Talk a little bit about your interest in getting this involved and the impact it can have on learning.
Well, one of the things we've been trying to do is form partnerships with outside organizations, and this is one very strong program that we got very excited about. Actually, Chloe brought it to my attention, and we went through a grant process, and it's bringing in some funding and some opportunity for partnership with both University of Minnesota and I think from educational people in China. So it's going to be a wonderful opportunity.
Chloe, you teach the language here for Chinese language with us. What's it like? How do the kids handle it? What do you see as opportunities with this partnership?
I certainly say that Chinese is become popular in a lot of areas. If the kids want to go to the engineering, they're thinking about taking Chinese. And then the Chinese, because the economic and then the population, they become very, how to say, the world would notice this change, and then the people want to learn about Chinese culture besides the language. And I think the kids, the Chinese is not easy language to learn, but there is a way to learn. This is our teacher's job to find a way to let the teacher be successful, even it's a hard language.
And did you talk a little bit about your work with the university and how you help grow this partnership?
Okay, so my name is Qijie Li, and from Confucius Institute and the University of Minnesota, and I work with John Brzezinski and as a Chinese director. So represent the Hanban. I would say that is a great opportunity for our Confucius Institute to work with Edina Public School District. And I'm very looking forward to work close with all of you to promote Chinese language and the Chinese culture. And I'm quite sure that your school district is very high ranking in the national wide. So we are sure that this our Confucius Classroom program will be enhanced with your join. Yeah, and so we are close to upcoming Year of Horse. So based on the control force. This year's control force of Year of Horse is Star of Learning. What better a time to start or continue Chinese learning? Okay, so welcome to join us.
Thank you very much. And again, on behalf of the community, I want to thank all four of you, and I know Bruce Locklear was also very involved, and we've had, we got to get a camera picture here.
Thank you.
And Randy Smazel, but we've had a official signing already, and I know we've got more celebration to come as we get closer to this. But again, on behalf of the community, thank you very much for joining us as partners in this great learning opportunity for our young people. Congratulations.
Happy for Year of Horse.
Thank you very much. And now we've got some amazing teachers who do wonderful things with technology. I'm going to ask Zach Prowell and Chris Hoffman to come up and learn more about their accomplishments. Earlier this school year, they were recognized by TIES, which is our technology consortium, for their great leadership in the work of technology. And Zach, let's talk a little bit about your love of technology and some of the things that you're doing in your classroom.
My love for technology actually sparks from a previous career when I worked for IBM, and luckily enough, computers weren't as rewarding as I was hoping, and just decided to pursue a career in education and wanted to merge the two as best I could, since technology is a spark for me. And I would say being able to see the kids, like a current project we're doing right now is Kid Blog, and being able to have the kids all have a chance to express their thoughts instead of being in a classroom where you wait and raise your hand, or maybe you share at a table. This is a chance for everybody's voice to be heard, and an opportunity to capture that so that we can look back on it and learn from it, in future times. But the possibilities are endless.
And we're talking elementary is going on. So project 3 years out. What do you think that classroom is going to look like, with the potential of how technology is going to keep evolving? What kind of things do you think are going to be happening with kids in the learning?
One of my hopes is actually because I have tables in my room where there's about 3 students per table, and I would love for students, like during a discussion when we're learning about something or having a hands-on experiment, to be able to just share their thoughts right away, or look up something to extend their learning, because I'm able to share things for them to learn from. But there was one instance where I told the student who was curious about watching the sun, because we were studying sun, moon, and stars, and they asked, how can I look at the sun if I'm not supposed to look at it? And I said, well, I have an answer, but I want to see what maybe you could discover. And she went home that night and she found out how she could look at it, but then also learned how she could, learned about a scientist who was able to record audio waves from the sun, from the sun rays that were coming. So it's just like things that I would never have thought of. She was able to do that through technology.
Fantastic. Congratulations. Chris Hoffman, how are you doing, sir? The world of math. Good to see you. So talk a little bit about your work in the technology, and how you advance technology, or how you advance the world of math through technology in your teaching.
Well, I think first I'd like to thank Mike Walker. He's really the one that got me into this. And I think what we found over the years is that more and more teachers are doing this flipped classroom. So I deliver the bulk of my instruction via video lessons that I create and I upload into video. The students have access to those videos 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, so it's really learning at their time and place of choosing what really meets their needs the best. And then they come back into the school, and I'm able to work with them on the extension questions that we generally do at home. That's completely reversed, so now that I can actually work with my students in the classroom on the homework and really get at those high-level questions that we generally want our students to work on. And sometimes where they struggle with that at home, they can come in, they can work with me in the classroom on those. It's really been absolutely brilliant. And one of the things I brought in before I came out here tonight, I took a look at my videos on YouTube. And what I noticed is this. I've had dozens of students watching these in Taiwan, Canada, Brazil, Iceland, Russia, Japan, the Philippines, Australia, New Zealand, India, Mexico, the United Kingdom, France, Ethiopia, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, and also China. To date, in this last year, I had 18,457 views. One particular video in my statistics course, I had 866 views, and that's just one lesson. I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, in the last 2 years, I haven't had 60 students, but in that one lesson, I've had over 800 students watch it. So if we really want to, as a school district, make a footprint worldwide, I think this is a great direction to move. And then also, given the weather that we've had recently in the school closings, it's really not a problem because I communicate with my students all the time via email and through my Moodle course. And when we've missed a beat in the classroom, I just watch it on the video and we'll come back and we'll work with it when I see you again. It's been really a great experience.
What a great story. Chris, congratulations, Zach. I think we've got pictures again here that we'll have to take.
Creek Valley.
Time for Creek Valley. Carrie Dahlquist and her team are going to come forward. We thank them for joining us tonight to learn more about the leader in me. Carrie, I'll let you do the introductions.
Sorry for the confusion. We aren't postponed, but that was my mistake. We
No,
brought
we're glad to have you here, girl.
students with us via video. So I'm Carrie Dahlquist. I'm the principal at Creek Valley.
I'm Kristen Green. I teach first grade at Creek Valley.
I'm Susan Charles. I teach music, and I'm also the PBIS coach.
Josh Jansen, and I teach PE.
So we're here to tell you a little bit about our Leader in Me initiative. Many of you are familiar with Stephen Covey, the author who wrote The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It's a business self-help book, and it was first written in 1989. It sold over 15 million copies and was published in 38 different languages. In this book, Covey illustrates that we're effective in attaining goals by adhering to universal and timeless ethics. The first book introduces the concept of the paradigm shift, if you're familiar with that, and it helps the reader understand that different perspectives exist.
In 2008, Covey also wrote a book entitled The Leader in Me, in which a group of Creek Valley staff and parents read this past summer. Its children's companion book was written by his son, Sean Covey, and is entitled The 7 Habits of Happy Kids. Schools around the country are adopting this framework to promote an atmosphere of leadership, communication, respect, and time management. In the words of a parent at a Leader in Me school, by teaching the skills of self-discipline, self-reliance, and self-confidence, the teachers are fostering the opportunity to learn life skills that are required to be productive adults. We've been teaching the 7 habits to Creek Valley students this year. As your handout illustrates, the 7 habits are: number 1, be proactive. You're in charge. 2, begin with the end in mind. Have a plan. 3, put first things first. Work first, then play. Number 4, think win-win. Everyone can win. 5, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Listen before you talk. 6, synergize. Together is better. And the last, number 7, sharpen the saw. Balance feels best.
We have a construction paper, is that working? We have a construction paper habits tree growing in our gym, and every month we have a Pride Day assembly, and the tree grows by a habit each month. And then after each Pride Day, I go to classrooms 2 at a time, and I read a story from the 7 Habits of Happy Kids to teach the habits. And we've also come up with new lyrics to One Republic's Counting Stars that we're going to play for you. It's a work in progress, so a little warning on that. And now every time we hear that song, this is what we think of.
so we'll stop it there. So focusing on student assets builds leadership skills and positively affects the school climate while also impacting student achievement. Our action steps align with the conversations from our Birth Through Grade 5 study, and they also complement our PBIS initiative. Susan mentioned she's our coach. That's an acronym that stands for Positive Behavioral Intervention and Supports. PBIS is the explicit teaching of behaviors using a common language. We frame all of our expectations under the umbrella of our school rule. I will act in a safe, respectful, and responsible way. So we have another video that we'd like to show you about our playground expectations, and we're continuing to work on these videos, and we'll show them after announcements so students see the visual. I might need to get through the rest of this song, though. Why don't you keep going, and then I'll play it.
In the near future, several high school students will be reading books to some of our students that align with the 7 habits during their collaborative Wednesday time. They'll serve as mentors as they model these leadership skills. Elements of a Leader in Me school include using leadership language, setting goals and recording progress toward their achievement, and providing opportunities for students to make a difference. For example, our patrols are now called safety leaders. Our 5th grade communication leaders broadcast the morning announcements when needed, and our 3rd grade lost and found leaders have neatly organized the many articles of clothing looking to find their way back home. Several Creek Valley staff had the chance to visit a Leader in Me school. So are we ready to show this first,
And I'm
maybe?
gonna just show the quick
Let's see.
video, and then
Yes.
Kristen will talk about that.
Creek Valley Playground Guidelines, being respectful, responsible, and safe. Share equipment, take turns, include others. Dress for the weather. Return equipment when you're done with it. Line up when it's your turn. Keep nature, such as snow and rocks, on the ground. Follow the rules for the season. Keep hands and feet to self. Use playground equipment correctly. Remember, Creek Valley, act in a safe, respectful, and responsible way.
So a number of our teachers were able to go to St. Louis to see a Leader in Me school. Our PTA has provided some funding and have committed themselves to providing extra funding for additional training as well. And we've written an Ed Fund grant also. Kristen Green will be talking a bit about her visit.
In November, 2 colleagues and I had the incredible opportunity to leave Minnesota and head down to Missouri to visit Stanton Elementary School in Stanton, Missouri for their Leadership Day. The Stanton community is much like our community right here in Edina. Stanton refers to themselves as a lighthouse school because they have not only implemented the Leader in Me philosophy, but they are doing it so well that others look to them as a beacon of light in this student leadership. The Stanton community has fully embraced the 7 habits, and this language is part of their daily natural vocabulary. They have embraced the notion that every person at Stanton is a leader in some capacity. Students have learned and explored about what type of leader they are and what they bring to their school community. Developing self-confidence and being a leader is truly the foundation of their school. Several students shared very personal accounts of how the expectation of them being a leader in their school, whether it be behind the scenes, leading in some way, or out in front of the crowd, has transformed them in a very positive way. There were even kindergarten and 1st grade students who got up on stage and spoke in front of a room packed with educators, and they were very eloquent and proud of their school. These students have a voice in their education, and they're very proud to show you their growth. One way that they were able to show their growth was through something they call their data notebooks. As we visited various classrooms filled with students, they were excited to show us these binders of their goals, charts of their progress, and samples of their work. They're tracking their progress towards specific goals using tables and graphs. And I was visiting first grade classrooms that these students were showing me. They weren't just simple goals. They were setting specific goals as to what reading level they wanted to be at and by when. How many math facts they would know and by when they would know these facts. Teachers were there to guide and educate, but students were really motivated by achieving the goals that they had set for themselves. These notebooks of progress went home each evening, and parents were able to be a support system by checking on how they were doing and how they could help at home. It's a very transparent process. Teachers, students, and parents know exactly where students are performing, what their goals are, and it is truly a team effort. Our day in Missouri included a bonus trip. We were introduced to a principal from another building who asked if we wanted to follow him across town and visit his school as well. His school was only recently beginning the process of becoming a Leader in Me school. He took time out of his day to give us a tour of his building to say, you know what, Stanton's been doing it and they do it really, really well. But we're in year 1 and here's what our school looks like, and here are some tips for getting this off the ground in your building. It was quite an honor to have him take time out of his day to speak very openly with us about the process. I left Missouri feeling very inspired and motivated and ready to share what I'd learned with my colleagues back at Creek Valley. I've started teaching my own first graders using the 7 Habits of Happy Kids. We have some really great discussions about what their roles are at Creek Valley and that each of them brings something as a leader to Creek Valley. I'm hopeful that we can use what we learned to lead Creek Valley into building its own legacy of student leadership. Thank you.
So in conclusion, we're preparing our young people for an uncertain future. Math and reading skills are imperative, but so are leadership skills and the belief in oneself. We hope that our focus on these skills, such as making good choices and getting along well with others, as well as managing time, help build the leaders of the future. And now we have time for questions from you.
I'm wondering, what kinds of changes have you seen with the way students interact with each other or with the way they can manage and monitor their own conduct and planning?
I think I can speak to that because in PE, I see them a lot more moving around in a social setting, and I have all of the first 4 listed up on my board, so when they come in and we've talked about what we're doing for the day, they get those as reminders, but that's not when I'm excited to see it, when they can see it right on the board. I'm excited when something comes up in class and I can stay away and watch them step out and be those leaders. Because some of them, it's kids who maybe have not had that confidence in the past, and now they know that it's a universal language we're all comfortable with, and to see that come out of kids that you might not expect it without having to interact to as a teacher is really rewarding for both us as teachers and them as kids too.
So how far along in the implementation process are you in your building? And the second question is, do you see this being something you'd like to share with our other elementary schools as something they can implement as well?
So I'd say we're just surface level right now, and we had a group of parents and teachers who read the book, but not everybody. It wasn't an expectation, so it's interest-based, and so we're teaching the 7 habits. We're through habit 4 at this point, and we can continue to do some of those things. To do a full Leader in Me school would need a large grant from a business, and we can look into that, not for next year, but the following year. We want to make sure it aligns with our birth through grade 5 study, and yes, for sure, would share it with other elementaries, whether it's this or something similar.
Mm-hmm.
I did visit the same school with a couple principals the year before. So, and it's Randy Smazel's former district, which is how we heard about it.
Well done. Thank you all.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, do we have any requests from the audience to speak this evening? Thank you. Next up, we have our leadership planning update. Dr. Dressen.
Thank you, Board, and I'm just going to, again, move through the process of our planning to give you an update on the progress we're making, as well as take a deeper look at our planning as it relates to our budget. Again, our strategic work is staying focused on what we do well around that Edina excellence, but how do we keep advancing it? And I think what we just heard from the Creek Valley team is very much about that advancing excellence. We do a nice, strong job with student leadership, but we're always looking for that next edge, and I commend them for that work, and we'll continue to celebrate that. When we're looking at our programming and our plans for the future, the board will likely be asked to act on our educational competencies as we continue to move forward with our strategic plan. One of the key pieces is that we're really starting to say, what do the students need? What are those core skills they need in the 21st century? And again, I'll reflect back on what we heard from Creek Valley today. Some of the things they're talking about really align well with what we believe need to be some of the core competencies all students have as they leave our school district. We have 3 major studies going on. One, we have the birth through grade 5 study. The second is the 6th through grade 12 program plan, where they're actually bringing recommendations for action to the school board later this spring. And then finally, the community education services plan, which is where we're going to be updating our strategic work with our community education program. When we look at this process, it's important that we recognize that we're in a new design phase, and we're actually moving through this phase in our strategic planning effort. And so if I was to put a label on where the birth through 5 study right now, they are out gathering information. So they're out in the discovery phase and really interpreting the data. So what we're going to see over the next 6 weeks or so with our birth through grade 5 study is this narrowing of information and starting to set some priorities of what we want to be about in how we serve our birth through grade 5 learners going forward. When we look at where we are with our grade 6 through 12 study, we're closer now where we've been there, we've made the recommendations, we went out, got more information about those recommendations, and we're at this point right now where we're starting to build some models, some prototypes. We're really starting to look at what should the middle level experience and the high level experience look like for our students, not just next year, but going into the future. So this is a 3 to 5 year plan. It is a very strong design build process, and wanted the board to be aware of that. When we look at our major priorities for this school year, again, we're working strong on building team because we know it's got to be a team effort, and so working hard with staff. Later this winter, I guess, I don't know how long winter is going to continue, but in February and March, we're going to be looking at a school climate where we get a baseline of how we're supporting one another. We're continuing to advance our professional learning communities. We've been working hard on our educational position statements, where we really define what is personalized learning, so we're speaking that same language as a community. Also around the issues of race and socioeconomic, to make sure that we're addressing that, we understand what that is, and finally this commitment to collaboration. But we'll have position statements that we can all work from that same page, and we'll be bringing those forward over the next months for further discussion and dialogue with the board, with the community, with the staff. Power standards, common assessment, grading, again, all part of our planning going forward. We talked about the secondary recommendations and the birth through 5 recommendations all coming forward later this spring. We've also talked a lot about how we're aligning our strategic plan, especially our budget and staffing, so how we spend our dollars, where we have our staff aligned with our priorities of the district. And then as we look forward to our 2014-15 calendar, how do we continue to make that more responsive? And as we plan for that, given what we know of winter, we might be looking at some more flexibility around that as well. The 7th major area of initiative is helping our staff with their workflow, and we've got some initiative work around that. We plan to expand our volunteer program, continue on this building project proposal. As I mentioned earlier in the meeting tonight, we did get an update from Wold Architects, who's been our architect serving us over the past 3 years, on things that we need to address, both from a maintenance standpoint and a possible enhancement standpoint. We'll be driving in a new teacher evaluation system, and we've got a committee that's already in place to help us with that, and those recommendations will be coming forward with a lot of training expectations. Finally, the next piece will be looking at a community-wide wellness initiative, and we last week had a meeting with the Chamber of Commerce, the hospital, the city of Edina and Edina Public Schools, talking about what would that look like if we're going to really try to drive a community-wide wellness and safety initiative in place. Now as we look at funding, and I'll ask Margot to step in with me on this a little bit, but we're really looking at how do we take the funds we have available and line them to learning. And we've got a variety of different resources that we have, everything from collecting fees to some one-time funding allocations to grants that were like the one we received tonight, to just some of the funds that we have either restricted or unrestricted to match up with the needs that we have. The board will be acting later tonight on our planning parameters. These parameters were developed by the administration. They were shared at a work session with the school board earlier this month, then reviewed by the Finance and Facility Committee, where it identifies our enrollment, the general funding allowance, commitment to funding for special education. It talks about some of the expenditures, again, that we will be bringing in all-day, everyday kindergarten, the impact that has. We'll talk again about some of the roll-forward expenditure items. And then we'll go through this process of aligning those to our initiatives, especially the All for All initiative is the commitment to closing the opportunity, access, and academic gaps. Really want to make sure any of the adjustments we need to make, be it reductions or whatever, that they're sustainable long-term. We've been very successful in that process, using what Edina has called the Berg process, budget reduction, reallocation, and revenue generation. So we continue to use that, working very closely with our Finance and Facility Committee, along with input from a task force of administrators at the district office as well as building principals. We'll be seeking input at the staff level and then bringing recommendations to the board later this spring. Along the way, we're continuing to monitor and make sure that we're maximizing the funds that we have approved for this year's budget. We are concerned, given the temperatures, what that's going to do to some of our utility costs. We're managing that. We have a variety of one-time expenditures that the board has approved over the past several months that will make sure that those are just one time and that they are pulled out of the next year's budget plans. We're continuing to monitor the 2014 legislative session. It's not a funding year, but we don't know. There might be some possibilities where we will have some new funding access, and that would take care of our planning process. But our work really begins this coming Wednesday. Once the board has approved the parameters and the action they take later tonight, the task force will begin their work, taking a look at possible enhancements we want to bring to advance our strategic work, and also taking a look at some adjustments or reductions we're going to have to make or spending our money in the new ways for 14-15. All that work will be coming forward to the board in March for a first time, and then further discussion in April, and we hope to finalize the budget planning around our general fund in April, end of April. We're recognizing again that where we need to be is someplace in that $500,000 to $750,000 adjustments, and we'll bring all that information forward to the board along the way, going through the committee process, as well as periodic updates at the full board level. Finally, I want to remind the board that this commitment to teachers' workflow, we do have a Workflow Institute, some one-time funding set aside. Mark Wallace, a teacher at Highlands, is receiving a stipend, continuing to teach full-time, but this past week we had David Allen join us. David Allen's recognized nationally for his work at a corporate level in working on managing workflow and workflow efficiencies. Mark Wallace will be championing some of that work, and we look forward to that being implemented the second semester with these major initiatives. That is what we have to share at this point. I'll pause and say, Margot, what did I miss? Or Gwen, or Susan, Steve, Mary. But questions to the board at this time?
Questions? Seen this all before in various forms a few times. So any comments? Thank you, Rick.
Very good, thank you.
Next up, we have our consent agenda. Get a motion, please, to approve.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Rick, could you please walk us through there?
Certainly will. We have our personnel recommendations, both in community education and in our district personnel offices. We've got expenditures payable for January 27th, a budget adjustment process for 14-15. This is an annual event that the board does need to take action on because of the possibility of reductions. This is something that school districts throughout the state of Minnesota do at their January meeting. We've got joint goals between the city and the school district, and we're excited about that. We continue to look for partnerships with the city. A lot of our focus is around facilities. It's around where we can collaborate in staffing, around some of the training, and a lot of the ongoing discussions, so we continue to build our partnership with the city where possible. We've got some amended College and Career Center coordinator stipend, an agreement with the Confucius Institute, which we heard about earlier today, the commendations to our exceptional teachers through the TIES organizations, and a variety of gifts. And that would conclude the consent agenda.
Thank you very much. Any discussions or items anybody like removed from the consent agenda? All those in favor of approving the consent agenda as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We're on to the action portion of this evening's meeting. Item A is board committee appointment, liaisons, and representatives for 2014. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to approve board committee appointments, liaison, and representatives. A big thank you to Cathy Cella for all the work she put into this. Any other feedback or questions or input?
I should just note that for the school sites, we've left the school sites basically as is because we only change those at the end of every school year. So we have slotted our new members into schools that members who are no longer here were at, but other than that, there weren't wholesale changes in that area.
Thank you, Cathy. And also a reminder that the school sites are where you do not have any of your own children, just for future reference. I don't know if that's been mentioned. Any other additional items, questions, comments? All those in favor of approving the committee appointments, liaisons, and representatives for 2014, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all. We have the amended lease purchase financing that's been inserted into the agenda. Get a motion to bring it to the floor?
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. It was not in the original packet, but you should have a hard copy there. Margot, would you like to walk us through?
In September, you as a board approved moving forward with construction to Concord and Cornelia Elementary Schools for kindergarten additions. And in November, we received approval from the Department of Ed on the review and comment, and then proceeded to work with Jody and Joel at Ehlers and Associates to secure financing and had RFPs go out. So Jody Zespa is here from Ehlers and Associates to report on the results and make a recommendation.
Great. Thank you, Margot. So we did look at a couple of different options for financing the additions, and in the past, I know that we have used the certificates of participation option for some of your lease purchase transactions. In this case, we went through an evaluation of the pros and cons related to the certificates of participation as well as a direct lease purchase option through the request for proposal option. And we decided that for a number of reasons, the request for proposal option made the most sense in this particular case. So that is the process that we move forward with. We sent out the request for proposals on January 16th, and we sent them out to 3 companies and firms that have been interested in financing those transactions in the past. Last Friday then was the due date for the proposals, and we only received one proposal, but it's a great proposal from Capital One, and they have been the low bidder on a number of our transactions recently, so we feel very comfortable working with them. We had estimated the lease purchase financing at $1,742,000. Based upon the proposal now that we've received from Capital One, we can drop that down to $1,740,000. The rate that they provided in their proposal is a 3.43%, and in the report that we provided to you for your last board meeting, we were estimating a 3.87, so it's significantly lower than we thought it would be. Rates have come down since the time that we received our initial quotes back in December, so we would expect the rate to be lower, and so we were happy to see that they came in with a lower rate for us. The other terms that they have included in their proposal are pretty standard, some different prepayment features, And so with that, we recommend that the board adopt the resolution provided to you, which includes Capital One as the lessor on this particular transaction, which will provide the financing for the additions at Concord and Cornelia Elementary Schools. There is a schedule attached, and it's exactly the same in format as the schedule that we provided to you on January 13th. The sources and uses related to the funds, the payment schedule, which is now updated for that lower rate. The annual payments are about $5,000 less than we had estimated initially, so that's good news. And the tax impact is virtually the same as what we presented to you on January 13th.
Thank you. Questions?
Any idea why only one bid?
You know, we're not getting a lot of bids on lease purchase financing, whether we go through the RFP process or the certificates of participation. You may remember that from the past. We generally only get a handful of bidders on that financing option also. We fully expected to get another proposal. There was another firm that was very interested, and at 9 o'clock last Friday morning, he heard back from his bank, and they were confused about actually the term of the lease, and so they backed out at the very last minute. So had we known, you know, those are two of our best bidders and always give us really, really good rates. Had we known that that one wouldn't have come to fruition, we probably would have pursued a couple of additional firms. But the rate they gave us is a great rate. They've been the low bid on a number of our transactions, so we still feel really comfortable with the rate and the proposal and the terms that they've provided to the district. We only need really one good proposal. I know we'd like to have a lot, and it's always better to have a few in the mix, but that is where we ended up.
And is there a reason that you're only getting one bid? You know, is it a lot of paperwork? What's the sort of the background?
You know, we had one company that was a pretty frequent bidder, and they're a larger organization, and they're only providing proposals now on equipment-related bids for some reason, or equipment-related projects, and they aren't providing bids related to the construction projects. So I think it just kind of depends upon where they're at this point in time.
So is there anything we would do differently in the future to try to get more bids?
You know, I think we could have, had we known that the one bidder was going to drop out at the last minute, we probably would have asked a few more to participate. We felt pretty confident with the two that we were working with that they were going to give us really low rates and good bids based upon our experience to date. So, and you know, obviously Edina is a very attractive district, and I know we heard back from the winning bidder, Capital One. They said, what a great district to work with. We're really happy that we got the transaction and are looking forward to working with them on this particular project. So certainly nothing against the district. It's not uncommon for us to get just a couple of bids. And last summer, in fact, with St. Louis Park, they were financing some additions also, and Capital One was the only one that came through with a bid related to that transaction too.
But so, given the bids that you're seeing for other districts that you work with, this is a good rate?
Absolutely, yep, yep. And certainly much better than we anticipated a month ago even. So I think the market has come down. We feel really confident that they're giving us a great bid every time they do submit a proposal. They're great to work with, nice big company. So we have no concerns at all with the proposal that they presented to us.
Additional discussion? Thank you both. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Jody.
Next up, we have our master agreement, Health Service Association Organization. Need a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Gwen, a little background, please.
Yes, we negotiated with the Health Service Associate Organization for their contract. It's a smaller group of people who support our health services in each of the sites. And the salary increases are 0.75 for year one, which is 2013-14, and 1% increase in year two. Also, for health insurance increase, it will be 1% for this current school year and 2% increase for next school year. One of the challenges that we have had with this particular group is that we've not been able to retain some of our registered nurses. And in several of our buildings, we have registered nurses, and the turnover rate has been quite high. So one of the things that we were able to look at as we did some analysis with other districts to see the salary rates for registered nurses, we realized that we were a little low. And so we developed a different separate salary schedule for them, which is new for this particular group. And that's the other change that we have with this particular contract. I will entertain any questions, or Margot can entertain any questions as well.
Can you just go through the numbers, because I see 0.75 in year one, 1% in year two, but then I see 9.39. So can you just explain how 1 3/4 equals 9.39?
Well, sometimes 1 and 1 equals 9. Actually, this group has some turnover and they work through the steps. Thank you, Gwen. There's some step movement, so some of that is, and they're very small groups. So any roll-up in this group is magnified in a percentage because they're just such a small group of pool of people.
And this was discussed at least once, if not twice, at HR committee, talking about this transition with the registered nurses. So,
Yes, we appreciated the support.
Leny, does that get you the information you're looking for?
I kind of gather it's they're landing on different spots in the schedule, and that's what's causing the increase.
Yes.
Additional questions or comments? All those in favor of approving the master agreement for the Health Service Association organization, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you for all the work. Next up, we have our budget parameters for 2014-15. Can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Margot, we've talked through this, I think, before, but anything else you'd like to share?
I know that Dr. Dressen provided the summary in the presentation. This is just more detailed backup in terms of enrollment, revenue, and expenditure assumptions. We went through it briefly, or in summary, at our work session. Finance and Facilities has also looked at it, and answer any questions you have and recommend approval.
Other than the assumptions relating to some of the new financing from the state and the way they've changed some of the categories, are we changing dramatically any of our assumptions this year from the way we've budgeted last year?
No. No.
Margot, I appreciate the information included on the parameters regarding how much the basic formula has increased in the last 23 years, being just 2%. Do you have a rough estimate of how much expenses have naturally increased in that same time frame?
That would be an interesting calculation. No, I don't have it, but I could look back and.
But more than 2.
Yeah, more than 2.
I mean, I know,
Definitely
just
more than 2.
For point of comparison,
Yeah,
that was helpful background.
And when we highlighting that area of revenue that on average over 20 plus years increases about 2% is not our full amount of revenue, and sometimes in the budget process we talk about that a 2% revenue or 1% revenue increase is on a portion of our revenue and doesn't equate to a 1% increase in expense in terms of dollars because it's only part of our revenue source.
Thanks, Margot. Additional questions, comments?
So didn't the formula shift a few years ago when the state took over more and there was supposed to be less property taxes?
2002?
And so is that, this 2%, does that work? In other words, how does that relate to that shift back at that time?
So when I calculate back, and you can tell I've been doing this a while when I'm going back 20 plus years, I do it, it's net out those in the general ed formula, sometimes in this legislative session is a good example, where there was an increase in the funding formula, but there were also some changes in the formula that were revenue neutral to the two districts, and that there just was a different way of paying us. I back those out so that when I'm reporting that on average there's an increase, that's what I would term the true increase in the formula over that period of time. Many years ago, we had a categorical funding for transportation that was rolled into the general ed formula allowance back in the 90s. No new money to districts, so that's not included in there. Otherwise, it would artificially increase that number when it was no new dollars.
Thank you.
Additional questions, comments? All those in favor of approving the budget parameters for 2014-15, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next up, we have item E, our district legislative priorities for 2014. Can I have a motion to bring that to the floor?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion?
We did have our legislative meeting with our local legislators last week. It was very successful. The priorities, again, this is not a big funding year, but it's one that we still watch carefully because we do want to continue to keep our independence where we can. So we're looking at where we can reduce mandates that are not funded, where we want to make sure that we continue to have stabilized funding going forward. Some of the work around making sure that as we move forward with our teacher evaluation plan and some of the other work on helping advance staff training, that we continue to get support there. And so, again, it's probably much as monitoring and responding to issues that may come up. We work very closely with the Association of Metropolitan School Districts and the Minnesota School Board Association in making sure that we continue to stay active through the legislative process, but we're very fortunate to have good partners with our state legislators who really do understand, I believe, the needs of Edina Public Schools.
Thank you, Rick. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor of approving the district legislative priorities for 2014, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Next up, we have policies. Can we get a motion to combine these all? Items, policy 429, 509, and 617.
I'd like to move that we combine letter F, parts 1, 2, and 3 into one piece.
Thank you. Discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Can I get a motion to bring that to the floor?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to approve policy 429, 509, and 617. Please note that 509 is an amended version that was the same version we had last meeting, where we made a minor tweak or two to it. Who wants to start with 429?
Well, I can address the three pretty much together. These are policies that we reviewed at our December meeting in light of the changes that are being made to the kindergarten programming. So it's adjusting the language to align with the changes in the kindergarten options. For 509, at our December meeting, there was discussion proposed by Cathy Cella to address the language in some sections of policy 509 that would change the language where it states Edina Public Schools to Edina School District, which would be more accurate for issues involving residency. We are residents of the Edina District as opposed to residents of Edina Public Schools. So the walked-in version just shows the highlighted spaces where that particular language is affected, and everything else remains the same. For 429 and 617, there are no changes from December.
Thank you, Regina. Any other discussion or questions? All those in favor of approving policy 429, 599, and 617, please signify by saying aye.
509.
I'm sorry, 509. I got a scribble here on my paper. I couldn't read through. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Then we have our item G, the amendment to the calendar, which was walked in this evening due to our fine winter weather. Can I get a motion to bring that to the floor?
So moved.
And it's been moved and seconded. Little discussion, background?
Well, again, I can say we are setting all kinds of records, not the ones that Edina necessarily likes, but the fact of the matter is that this is truly a rarity that Edina ever closes. To close twice in a year. We could not trace it going 50 years back where that's happened, and now with the closing last Thursday, the closing today, and the closing tomorrow, we're at 5 days, and we recognize that we need to make sure that the learning is occurring. And so we're making some schedule changes. I'll ask Gwen Jackson, who helps coordinate the calendar, to give a little overview of those date changes, and then we can maybe go a little bit further into our discussion before the board takes action.
Surely. So the first date is Wednesday, February 5th, which is next Wednesday. That would be a late start for us, and instead of having a late start, we are proposing having school the entire day. The second date is Tuesday, February 18th. That was going to be a day when students were not in session at all because we were doing professional development. We will be doing professional development in another manner, and we proposed for students to be in school all day that day. And then the third date that we have is Friday, March 7th, and we are proposing that students be in school all day as well. And we will make alternative plans with staff for other professional development and other activities that they were going to do.
Further, we recognize some families probably have got plans already made. Oftentimes, that 4-day weekend, for example, is a good travel weekend for some of our families looking at college and university. So we will consider those excused absences, and we'll take steps to make sure that that's understood. We, again, will look at creative ways to make sure our staff, because those are important training days, and really, as we look at all this change going on, we do need to continue to support our staff and their training efforts, so we're going to get creative with that and use some of our technology tools possibly to support that effort. The district will be taking a management review this spring, once we get through our winter season, to just assess this whole emergency closing process and things that we can look at differently. We'll be seeking input from staff, from students, and from community members to say what's the best way to manage our weather. As I mentioned earlier today on the radio, Minnesota never lets the weather win. We just make adjustments after we've experienced it. And if the lake freezes over, you drill a hole to fish. And if you want to go bike riding, you just get a bike with bigger tires. We're going to figure out a way to manage this weather so that we don't have a negative impact to learning and that we continue to advance it. We have worked closely with our neighboring school districts, with the various emergency weather agencies along the way, and have put safety first, and yet it's been challenging because we would like to look at some other options that we think we could pursue as well, and so we'll explore those going forward, but I support this action highly.
Questions, comments, additional information needed?
Does this take, if we get 2 more days, I mean, not saying we are, how much cushion does this give us?
Good, very good question.
That's a good question. It gives us quite a bit of cushion, which was why we were looking at full days as opposed to the late start next week. And then we have an early release later in March. That only gave us 2 hours of cushion each time, and this will give us a significant amount.
So we will meet the state requirements as far as hitting the minimum number of hours. We exceed that, so we're comfortable with that. I think our bigger concern, rather than hitting state minimum requirements, is this whole learning thought. And we also want to take advantage of the time because we really have had a struggle start for our learners and our staff, and we know it's been a pressure on our families as well. So we really want to get this launched, and that we're going to take advantage of this time in February to get that good launching going forward. So we're optimistic that the weather is going to turn, and that we are going to get back in session, and we're going to capture these times so that we don't see a negative impact due to Minnesota weather beating us a little bit.
I think it's great that we can do this within the calendar year, particularly with, heavy testing that comes at the end of the year, instead of trying to add it on to the end of the year. So I'm really pleased with the decision that you guys have brought forward.
Additional discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries to amend the 13-14 calendar by adding 3 days. Next up, we have discussion items, capital project requests for 14-15.
I'll let Margot Bach give us a quick flyover as we look at capital projects. Know that we bring these a little bit earlier, again, simply because we want to get competitive with some of the key bids we might have going on.
Okay, I don't see it on here. I can just narratively. I'll just run through the process with you. I believe it's in your board materials, but we are in the process of our annual capital project request. It starts in the very beginning of October and runs through February when you as a board approve the overall guidelines for it, and then we move forward. As Dr. Dressen said, we try to get out a little bit early in case there's quotes or bids that we need to start proceeding with so that we can get out in the market. We ran the same process that we have run in the last few years. However, the results look just a little bit different this year, and I'll explain why in a little bit. Basically, all sites or departments have the opportunity to submit information. And then we categorize the request, whether it's a building improvement request or equipment request, a bus request, whatever it might be, curriculum, textbooks, that kind of thing. And we categorize it in a variety of areas on possible funding sources, because sometimes the requests that come in may not be fundable out of capital, but they might be out of health and safety. They might be now under our 10-year alternative facilities plan coming down 2 years down the road in a particular building. So we look at all sorts of things and then prioritize the critical safety needs, age of equipment, and sources of funding and energy and equipment. Basically, I have about $2 million available after fixed costs and capital to allocate out to the various sources. This year, the number of requests were down in terms of dollar value. We had $3.3 million worth of requests for the $2 million. The reason the requests were down is Eric Hamilton, the Director of Buildings and Grounds, and myself went out to each site and met with each principal and building head and explained the 10-year plan and where their facility fell in the 10-year plan, what was going to be addressed within their facility, talked about the first year through when we're doing HVAC, and the second year through when they're going to have roof replacement, paving, all those kinds of things, so that we weren't wasting time and energy with a request that maybe is coming 2 years down the road. And so principals and building heads really were thoughtful about their requests in terms of if it wasn't being addressed then in the 10-year plan, bringing that forward. We also have conversations longer term about 21st century learning and what should facilities look like. So if some requests fall under that umbrella, we'll move that forward in the process we talked about in the work session. So a combination of results. We did see an increase in requests for equipment, specifically in the buildings and grounds area, because capital historically has been so tight and the critical needs have been in the buildings. Our custodians have done a fabulous job of keeping and maintaining their equipment for well beyond the useful life. And we are in dire need to replace some equipment, so we are inventorying, prioritizing, and so some of the dollars will go to replacing some much needed equipment to help do our operations more efficiently and effectively. So to summarize, the recommendations for the use of funds are for transportation, $400,000. That will be roughly 4 buses. We need to replace 4 buses annually for our fleet. so that we do not have buses, at too high of an age. Textbooks for the annual curriculum adoption, $400,000. We have site allocations, which go based on enrollment, building square footage, and building age to each of the sites. That's under the principal's discretion to replace equipment that's needed within the buildings. Buildings and grounds would be $400,000. That would be a combination of building improvements, primarily under $50,000. Any large dollar amounts now are being addressed in the alternative facilities plan. These are really emergency related. They're critical. All of a sudden it's raining in the spring, and because of the winter we've had and the cold, part of the roof is leaking, we find out in the spring, and we've got to patch and repair it right now today. Those kinds of things, and that's what we address out of capital. And then again, some equipment needs for the buildings and grounds. We also want to be futuristic in our planning with the buildings and grounds allotment, because we do know there's the alternative facilities plan, the facility advisory task force work coming on, and so we want to make sure that in the future we have dollars to access here as we have future building needs. And then health and safety, $278,000, and then some general allocations that we have annually. Concord and Cornelia addition, the majority of the funding is lease levy, as you just approved earlier. However, part of the review and comment from the state was the furniture, fixture, and equipment, your desks, tables, chairs. They are not fundable under lease levy, so those need to come out of capital. So you see that's a unique piece there this year for one time to get that taken care of. So asking your approval overall for the capital. It has gone to Finance and Facilities Committee, and I would answer any questions that you have.
And this will come back for action at the February meeting.
Oh, that's right. Yes, this is just a discussion. Thank you. I was ready.
So
I was ready to go.
I understand that. I understand that. So we can also make sure that it becomes more public in the presentation, because we weren't able to do this. So we'll summarize this at the February meeting.
Yes,
when we take
request for
action.
approval at February.
Questions, discussion?
I think that Eric Hamilton going around really, from what he was sharing and you were sharing, was very helpful to the requests that were sent in. And it's nice to see that he's been such a great addition for the district.
Yes, and he has been out in the sites, and so he's observing and seeing things. We were able to have very detailed conversations versus a slide that says, oh, Highlands is this year in Creek Valley, or it doesn't, from a principal's perspective and a building head perspective, tell me the details, how it's really going to impact my building. So we were able to have those in-depth conversations, which was very good.
Additional questions, comments? Thank you, Margot. Well done.
Thank you, Margot.
Next up, we have policy 502. Search of student lockers, desks, personal possessions, and student's person. Who wants to start?
This is a policy that's going to be reviewed by the committee over the next week. It, again, is just some minor adjustments, but where we're really addressing it is in the appendix later under the information. So there are just, because we're going to be tying them together, the appendix and the policy will go for action next month. So there really aren't changes identified.
Do we need to, where we've pulled things out of policy because they're procedures and they're in the appendix, do we need to?
That's the cleanup.
Right, that is. And do we just need to, in that section of the policy, just make a reference to see Appendix 1
Yep.
so that somebody who's reading the policy realizes there's an appendix to look at?
That's correct.
Good point.
Everybody's clear?
What, do we know why it's being proposed to move into the appendix instead of staying in the policy?
It gives us a little more flexibility administratively on the management of it, And so legal counsel gave us this advice to just put everything into the appendix rather than, and to have it stay in policy.
Does having it in the appendix change the process for making future changes?
It allows a little more flexibility in being responsive because it becomes a management function versus a board function.
So the appendix, when the appendix is changed, it's given to us as information. We don't actually approve the information that's in an appendix or any of the supporting documents to a policy. We approve the policy.
Okay, thank you.
And usually the appendix will have more procedural steps that administration actually takes rather than something at the level of the policy. It's their steps to implement it.
Is the type of screening something that's now appendix versus policy? And so that the type of screening, we're now giving that responsibility to administration rather than having the approval level at the board?
That would be correct.
Just have to think about that.
So this is just for discussion this evening, and this will come back to us.
And we can certainly look at moving that appendix, working that appendix in policy language at the committee level.
So that's where it's going next.
Right.
Is that appendix completely new? Or is
The
it just-
formatting is new. What this allows us to do is to pilot, as it were, the use of breathalyzers if the administration would like to at a upcoming dance because of some of the concerns we've had. And so what this does is it allows us to pilot it through this appendix process because we couldn't get 2 readings in prior to the board meeting. And then if that is indeed successful and that's something, then we would bring that appendix. We could then choose at a committee level whether we want to keep an appendix or it goes back into the policy.
Because the policy itself already authorizes screening students prior to district-sponsored
Yeah,
or
yeah, I saw
school-sponsored
that.
events. So that's been in policy for a while.
Okay.
Right, it becomes the level, the type of screening.
Right.
Correct.
And,
Was the policy as previously drafted interpreted as not allowing breathalyzer?
It didn't have breathalyzers, no, it had a pat-downs was an option, but didn't have breathalyzer specific.
It says it may include but isn't limited to pat-downs.
Right, so we just felt we wanted to be explicit with that. And so the way we could execute that was through an appendix. And it is a practice that other high schools have as well.
Additional discussion, questions, comments? We've got a couple of additional information items. 502 is listed here twice. 902, that's just the appendix.
That's correct. That's getting alignment of the language, so we're consistent in how we execute some of our facility use practices, especially in the summer months. And so,
But I saw that we took camps and clinics out, but where did they end up? I couldn't find out where they were.
so they're not in the appendix?
Nope, we just struck all the language, but didn't put it somewhere else, unless it ended up in the policy. But if it ended up in the
No, it
policy, I
didn't end
should
up
see
in
the policy.
I'll have to do some checking on that one. We have time on that one.
Okay.
So I'll review that.
Yeah, it's just deleted on the bottom.
Yeah. It's deleted all the way through.
Anything else on either one of those? Under announcements?
We are, again, just trying to get through our weather, among many other things. We're excited about things that are going on. Do want to thank the staff at Countryside Elementary as well as Edina Police Department for successfully executing a situation where we did have to have a lockdown due to an unwelcome visitor in the building. It was very successfully executed. We also recognize that this will allow us, again, to step back to say, okay, what do we need to be doing to maintain a safe and secure schools for all of our students, not just at Countryside, but all sites. So we'll be doing a full management review on that. There are some limited recommendations from that task force that brought recommendations for board action last spring due to funding. So one of the areas we are also watching is the funding options that might be available at the legislative level to allow school districts to levy additional funds to possibly execute some of the recommendations that we'd like to recommend in the area of capital. But at this point, we're going to, again, step back and do a full review of this, and then we'll probably have a follow-up report back to the board on next steps. But we are pleased with the protocols that we did put in place and the additional training that we did, because everything that we had worked on was very well implemented at that site. And so congratulations to the students, the staff, Principal Karen Bergman, and our law enforcement team for making and maintaining a safe setting for learning at Countryside last week.
Well done.
Any other additional items, announcements? You get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to adjourn. Unless someone objects, we are adjourned. Thank you all.